Hey guys, and welcome to the Hackanon's YouTube channel. In this video, we will be talking about the try and except block in Python. While we write great codes in Python, we are bound to encounter some errors along the way. These errors can be termed to two types. One is a syntax error, which occurs due to unnamed variables, misspelled variables, missing symbols such as an equal sign or something else. And the other error is known as the exception error. So exceptions generally get raised when there is an internal error which causes or disrupts the normal flow of the program and its execution stops at that moment. Due to the stop of the execution, the further code cannot be compiled and that causes problem in our program. So today we will learn how to control these problems using the try and except block. So I got a really simple example. I've created a code that divides two numbers and returns its quotient. Okay, so I've created a number variable that stores the data 10 and num2 variable that stores the data 2. I simply use the flow division and save the variable output in the variable div and I print that output. Okay, well, everything works fine because 10 divided by 2 gives us a value of 5, so everything is working great. But as you know, we cannot divide a number by 0. So let's try to change this num2 value to 0, and now let me run the program and see what happens. Ooh, if I run the program, I get a big long error that says line 9, there's something called as a 0 division error, internal division or module by 0. Which means Python is trying to tell us that it can't divide a number by 0. And that's why it's throwing an error onto our output window. So let's try to understand how do we tackle this problem. It's really simple. We just call the try word, the try keyword, and all the block that we want to test and work with to check if it's working properly, we will indent it into the try block. Okay, so I'll just indent it. Now, if we come up with an error, we will call something called as except. So that except will simply tell us an error. So for the timing, I'll just say number cannot be divided by 0. So I'm trying to tell the user that the number cannot be divided by 0, so the input needs to be changed. Okay, it's better than seeing this error here. So let me run the program. So as you can see, there was an error because the number could not be divided by 0, and that's why the code went inside the except condition and it printed the text saying that number cannot be divided by 0. So now, what if the working of the code executes perfectly inside the try statement? We will call something called as else statement. Okay, so what we'll say, else print the number, that is div. Okay, and we don't need to put the print statement in the try block because it's inside the else statement. Okay, so now let me run the program. So the same output is coming since the values are unchanged. So now I'll change it to 2. And if I run the program, wow, it's gone to the variable 5 and printed that on our output since we have gone into the else block. So now that we have understood a basic understanding of try and except statement, let's talk about some errors that we will come across while we are coding. The first common error is called as a name error, which usually occurs when we do not define that variable in its local or global scope. Okay, so for example, if I try to print a variable called as Python and run the program, we come to an error called as a name error, and it says Python is not defined since we did not create the variable, right? So then we can make use of the try statement and say try, okay, and then I'll print Python. So we'll try to check if there's a variable called Python, and if it is there, we'll print it. And if that variable isn't present in our program, then we'll simply print a statement saying that variable is not defined. So this will help us out to debug our code. Okay, so instead of that big fat error coming out, we can see something called as variable is not defined, which is better and easier to understand. So we have another error called as an index error, which index out of the bounds of a list or array. Then we have got a type error, which returns an error when we try to concatenate different type variables. Like you cannot concatenate a string and an integer. So when you try to do that, that time the type error will come. And we also have something called as a file not found error, which happens when you try to open a file which does not exist inside a folder. So let's try to understand the file not found error. Okay. So to work with a file, I'll simply create a variable called file, and I'll use the function called as open. And inside that I'll specify the file name. So let's say I want to specify the file name called python.txt. Okay. So I've got one file called as a python.txt. So I want to open that. Okay. So I'll just print file. So as you can see, we are getting all information about the file. Okay. So which means everything is working perfect. The file exists. But what if we are trying to open some file which is not there? Okay. So let's say if I open a file called study.txt, but as you can see over here, there's no file called as study.txt. Okay. Inside my working folder. So if I try to print this, there will be an error. File not found error, which I was talking about. So it simply says that there's no file in the directory called as study.txt. So now what we'll do is we will use the try statement, and then I'll pretty much indent the working code inside the try clause, and then except. Okay. So I'll print file is not present. So we have something called as a finally block. So the finally block, if specified, will be executed regardless if the try block raises an error or not. So that does not matter if we go inside the try statement or an except statement, the finally will still work. So let me try to explain you that. Okay. So I'll simply just say we have entered finally block. Okay. So you'll try to understand this better. So when I run this program, first thing it goes inside the try block and it sees that study.txt is not present in our folder. So then it goes into the except block and it says file is not present. And then it goes to the finally block. Since we have specified that the finally block will always execute, so it goes into that block and then it prints saying that we have entered finally block. So this is useful when you want to specify some information to the user irrespective of how the function of your code is running. Okay. So that pretty much completes this video where we learned how to handle exceptions and errors in our program to help us debug our code more efficiently. If you like this video, do drop a like, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for further notifications. We'll be back soon with more fun and interesting videos.